Hi, this is A New Nigeria with Wale Oluwade. This is your current affairs program where we critically examine the strategic issues bedeviling Nigeria's developmental aspirations and boldly offer simple, practical, but audacious ideas on building the Nigeria of our collective desires. Today's episode is a continuation of what I started 4 weeks ago, where I identified 3 strategic issues. In my opinion, I believe if we can get right, we would have begun, the march to genuine rebuilding of our nation. These 3 strategic issues are job creation and poverty eradication, and then how we manage our crude oil resources, and number 3, power, that's power availability and sufficiency. So last week I I began dealing with the issue of managing our crude oil resources for better efficiency. So this is the second part and final part of that presentation. We'll take this short break, and when I get back, we'll continue with that presentation. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Now, let's get right into the presentation in this second part. So, in the first part, I've done a thorough analysis of how other nations that have crude oil resources, and even those who do not have, like Nigeria, have built massive funds under management in their sovereign wealth fund, and how Nigeria so far only has got 2 billion in our own sovereign wealth funds. Now, this is a practical example because, like I said also, it's not just that we have thoroughly mismanaged our crude oil revenues. In addition to that, you now have some of our compatriots in collusion, with foreign collaborators going to pipelines and vandalizing the pipelines, cutting away this crude, to sell, and thereby robbing Nigeria, of huge sums of money. But I needed to show this slide so that you see an example of how, the mismanagement of that sector has robbed Nigeria, in a massive, way. So this is a practical example. The following statistics is the breakdown of revenues earned by Nigeria from the years 2015 to 2019. Remember, Nigeria has been exporting and generating revenues from crude oil resources since 1958. That is 65 years. Every day we export crude oil. That is 65 years and counting. So for just 5 years, 2015 to 2019, this is a statistics of what we earned. And this statistics is sourced from the OPEC Annual Statistical Bulletin 2020 and also reported locally by Premium Times in its July 14th, 2020 edition. So in the year 2015, Nigeria got $41 billion. In 2016, we got $27.29 billion. In 2017, we got $37.98 billion. 2018, we got $54.51 billion. And 2019, we got $45.11 billion. The total of these earnings in 5 years amounts to a whopping $206.06 billion US dollars in just 5 years. Now, this total revenue receipts of $206.06 billion, when converted to naira, using the prevailing official rates at the period, that is 450 to a dollar, 450 naira to a dollar, translates to 92.78 trillion naira. If we convert this $206 billion to naira, it gives us 92.78 trillion naira. That is what we got in 5 years. So, yet the greatest and painful paradox of this is that regardless of these huge revenues, in the same years our petroleum products imports amounted to 265 billion. So while we earned the huge revenues, it didn't benefit us because we couldn't refine our crude oil locally. What does this mean? While we received 206 billion or 92.78 trillion naira in 5 years, guess what we did? Rather than that money coming into our economy to build, our reserves, to develop infrastructure, to develop human resource, or to diversify the economy. No, the money didn't come in. It didn't even firm up, our naira. Rather, the money went the other way. We used it to import, finished petroleum products. And not just that, we also had to source for additional 59 billion to add, to this 206 billion to make 265 billion. So we earned 206 billion, we spent 265 billion on imports. Now, and the reason why we're importing finished petroleum products is simply because our 4 refineries have been rendered inoperable through deliberate acts of economic sabotage by the self-same people employed and remunerated to manage them. That is the NNPC management and staff. Why do we have 4 refineries that are not working? In spite of turnaround maintenance year in, year out, guzzling tens of millions, of dollars in turnaround maintenance, and yet they're not working. Yet we have staff, earning, fat salaries and benefits and perks in those refineries. That is what has led to us losing 265 billion US dollars. So consequently, in the era when we earned this huge sum of 206 billion, it was in this same period we incurred the highest debts ever in our history. That is 77 trillion. So currently, under President Buhari, when we earned this huge revenue, it was under the same administration that we incurred a debt of 77 trillion naira. Also, it was in this era that our Central Bank of Nigeria went rogue, went totally berserk. Our CBN, lost it completely. What happened? This strategic agency of government, that is the CBN, saddled with the critical responsibility of keeping our revenues, threw away the rule book and every recourse to sound corporate governance, best practice in monetary policies management, and became a special purpose vehicle for government, intervening in everything conceivable. But even more curiously, it also became a roadside printing press where we simply minted cash to meet government's financial obligations. As at the last count, the CBN had printed without legal basis or approval of the National Assembly 22.7 trillion naira. Just let that sink in. The central bank lost it completely. The NNPC lost it completely. So we have people in the NNPC with PhDs, with master's degree in engineering, in all kinds of discipline. Yet these guys cannot manage 4 refineries, and we're losing, huge revenues. Now, the central bank that received the revenue to manage it, went rogue, completely went rogue. So that's a practical illustration of how not just the pipelines vandalization going on, even the what compounds the issue. In fact, where the crime of our crude oil resources management has gone on, or mismanagement has gone on, is actually in the mismanagement, by those who have saddled with that, critical responsibility. What are my suggested solutions to all this? I have gaps I have identified and all of what are my solutions? There is a company in Nigeria called the Nigeria Liquefied Natural Gas, NLNG. It was established in 1989 by the federal government of Nigeria, but incidentally, Nigeria only owns, through the NNPC, 49%. 3 other IOCs, Shell, Total, and Ajib, owns the remaining 51% in that proportions. Now, the NLNG has been a huge success story from these results. In 21 years of operations, the NLNG has an installed asset of $11 billion. It has generated $108 billion US dollars in revenues, has delivered $40 billion in dividends to its shareholders, and has paid over $9 billion in taxes to the federal government of Nigeria. It's also got over $15 billion gas in feedstock and contributes about 1% of the entire GDP of Nigeria. So the NLNG is a huge success story. And the reason why this company has been mentioned here, that is a business model, that will work for our crude oil and gas, sector. That's a model that will work. For as long as Nigeria, through the federal government, Ministry of Finance Incorporated, and Ministry of Petroleum Resources own 50% each, that's 100%. For as long as that situation continues, we're not going to come out of the debacle in our crude oil management, in the management of our crude oil, sector. The federal government of Nigeria needs to hands off the management of that sector for us to, derive maximum benefits like other countries that I highlighted, are doing. We can't continue doing this and expect different outcomes. You know what that means the way it's said. What are the reasons why the NLNG is a huge success? Like I said, number one is ownership. The ownership of the NLNG is 51% by foreign IOCs and 49%, by the federal government of Nigeria through the Ministry of Finance Incorporated and Ministry of Petroleum Resources. Every business Nigeria has managed has turned out to be a monumental failure. Nigerian Airways, Nigerian National Shipping Line, Nigerian Telecoms, NEPA, the list goes on. I mean, you should listen or read the interview granted by former President Obasanjo, on his experiences when he came back to power in 1999 of the experience with Nigerian National Shipping Line. We haven't got, the administrative discipline, the fiscal discipline, the governance discipline, to manage ourselves. If there's any major barrier to how Africans are treated globally, it is that we are unable to govern ourselves as intelligent, people. I don't say that lightly. I'm a Nigerian, a full-blooded Nigerian. I say that with a heavy heart, but that's the stark reality that confronts us. Nigeria needs to wash its hands off completely. That's, critical sector, because we're losing money. We're not benefiting from it. We haven't benefited in 58 years. Only a few individuals with their foreign collaborators have stolen our wealth, to empower and enrich themselves, while tens of millions of Nigeria, wallow in misery and poverty, and that cannot continue. Okay, so look at this. The PIA was passed in 2021 to deliver certain benefits, to us. What are the benefits? Attract about 40 billion foreign direct investments into the sector, revamp production output to about 4 million barrels per day. Now, currently, because of the acts of brigandage and sabotage, our crude oil production has diminished, to probably maybe 1.4 or thereabouts. The rest is being stolen. So the PIA was passed to ramp up production to 4 million barrels per day. But that's not happening. Now, it was also passed to increase gas production output to about 1.5 billion standard cubic feet per day. It was also passed to make the sector more transparent, efficient, and able to attract FDI. Let me say this: for as long as the federal government, through the NNPC, is the regulator, is a player in that sector, it's not going to happen. Nobody's going to bring their business into an industry where a competitor is also the regulator. That's what is going on. So for the PIA to deliver its benefit that was intended when it was passed, the federal government needs to get out of that sector. Hands off control of the NNPC. Hand over the NNPC, to those who have the expertise to manage it successfully. The final benefit was that it was meant to make NNPC a more efficient, transparent, and viable business entity. Look at this diagram. The federal government, through the Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Petroleum Resources, own 100%, with the states and local governments. And these are all the, stakeholders in the sector. For as long as the federal government retains controlling interest in the ownership of the NNPC Limited, the PIA 2021 objectives shall never be achieved. Critically, since the NSIA already manages all our oil proceeds, not all anyway, manages some of the oil proceeds, less than $2 billion, for the 3 tiers of government, it is my suggestion it is best placed, to represent Nigeria in the new proposed ownership in addition with the IOCs. What do I mean here? Now, the NSIA already manages, surplus from our crude oil, even though it's just $2 billion we put there. Now, I thought the NSIA is best placed, to represent Nigeria in the new, in my suggestion that, the federal government should relinquish controlling stake to IOCs, so that we don't have controlling stake. Now, even the minority shareholding that we would own in the new entity, in my suggestion, should be managed, by the organization that should represent Nigeria should be the NSIA, because they have the expertise. I know the man who is there, Mr. Oji, if I'm not mistaken, he's got experience in funds management. The institution is well managed, and so that is the organization that is best placed to manage and represent Nigeria on that in the new entity that will be so created for better and efficient output. Welcome back. Now, what are the potential benefits? I know I've mentioned them randomly as I made this presentation, but let me do a summary of some of the potential benefits, that we can derive if we manage our crude oil revenues, efficiently, like as we should. Number one benefit, potential benefit, that is. My broad ideas are premised on the firm belief that if we manage our resources wisely, we absolutely have no business seeking handouts from anywhere, whether China or Dubai or wherever. We do not have any business, looking for investors from anywhere. Number one benefit, potential benefits are we would be able to educate and develop a highly competitive and technically skilled manpower primed for the challenges of the future. Remember I said Singapore is a nation of just less than 5 million people, and yet it has built itself into a modern, nation state, with over $1 trillion in funds under management in their sovereign wealth fund. And all Singapore has gotten, are a highly skilled, technically skilled, and highly, educated human resources. We can do that in Nigeria. Number two, we'll be able to build world-class infrastructure, rails, roads from Abuja to Lagos, east-west road, and all of that. We would have, seaports that are, truly the pride, even airports that are the pride, of Africa. We would be able to incubate MSMEs aggressively in targeted sectors to meet local demands for goods and services and then drive export revenues. We need MSMEs to meet local demands for goods and services. And when we're done with that, we can begin to export these goods and services to earn, foreign revenues. Number four, build huge financial reserves in our sovereign wealth fund and then earn the respect and admiration of the rest of the world. Our travel passports would have respect and holders will be proud carrying it. And then number seven, our people who go to study abroad will gladly return to build their country. Guess what? Over 80% of Chinese return to China after studying abroad. Over 80% of Chinese, students, when they finish their studies in the UK, in America, in all these other places, they return to China. And I'm talking about, in their tens of millions, versus less than just 1% Nigerians who return, to Nigeria when they study. The Japa syndrome. When Nigerians go to study, whether 100,000 annually, they don't come back to Nigeria. Majority of them, 99% of them, do not return. You and I know, if we're going to be honest with ourselves, when our people are living here, they are not coming back to Nigeria. But the reverse in the case in China. And that's because the Chinese society is conducive for living. It's conducive for work and fulfilling, individual aspirations. Number 8, potential benefits. Crime rates would drastically reduce. Number 9, the African will be respected globally. And the lie and jaundiced ideas, which was the basis of racism, would finally be debunked. That the African, what is the lie? That the African is incapable or is less than human, is less than the human species because we do not have the capacity to govern ourselves. That's a lie. It's just because our leaders successively all over Africa, they have simply refused to do the right thing. And finally, Nigeria will then practically attain its potential as the giant of Africa and the liberation hope of the black peoples of the world. If Nigeria gets it right, every black man all over the world would have a sense of pride in having this, dark, beautiful skin that God has given us. And I look at this quotation. It's a Chinese proverb that says, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. But then if you didn't do that in 20 years, the second best time is now. I think it is high time we begin to do the right thing right now. Now, what are the summary of my suggested solutions that I dealt with a short while ago? So I said the PIA 2021, that's the Petroleum Industry Act, is a good legislation, but its success is contingent on some of this. Number one, the NNPC Limited, as presently structured and managed, has proven to be incapable of delivering efficient services and profitable returns to the country. We have spent between 10 to 20 billion on turnaround maintenance, that has neither maintained nor turned around anything. Rather, the refineries have been sinkholes of colossal corruption. The comments of former President Obasanjo on this are noteworthy and recommended for anyone. President Obasanjo granted an interview in the cable news. I think every Nigerian who is interested in how this country is governed should listen to or read that interview. He said it clearly that he does not think, even though the NNPC and the President have said the Port Harcourt refinery will come on stream, in December, he believes it's not going to happen. And I align my thoughts, with him. Until we privatize fully and the federal government relinquishes controlling stake in the NNPC, that institution is not going to perform. So therefore, privatize the NNPC Limited, urgently relinquish controlling interest in it and its entire asset through a competitive and transparent bidding process to interested, international oil companies. Adopt the NLNG business model in the structure of the proposed new entity. The way we privatized or opened up the telecom sector when we brought in the GSM in the late 2000s, that is what we should do. We shouldn't go through the method, the privatization method in the power sector. That has failed. So we should go through the process of privatizing, our crude oil sector, the NNPC, the way we did in the GSM, in the telecoms sector. Now, the NSIA should represent Nigeria on the board in this new entity, since it already represents the 3 tiers of government in a shareholding structure. Also, there is a need for a constitutional amendment to provide for a mandatory savings from crude oil revenues so that future governments don't go the way of the past wasteful governments. Then we need to do whatever it takes to get this done and scrap the excess crude account. Without, a constitutional amendment that mandates the federal, states, and local governments to set aside, whether it's 20% or 30% or even 10% of whatever revenues we earn from crude oil into a dedicated savings account, that is the sovereign wealth fund, it will never be done. Either the federal, the state, and the local governments, they will never do it. It's not going to happen if we expect them to do it voluntarily. Now, how effective has the NDDC, Niger Delta Development Commission, been as an interventionist agency? I am sure we all can agree it has never been useful. And so I am recommending here that that agency, should be scrapped forthwith. It has only been useful in providing occasional comic relief. Remember when some MDs come to the National Assembly, and they were fainting, and then you hear things like, off the mic, or the MD is accusing the chairman, or the chairman is accusing the MD of threats. It's all about, currently, there are thousands of failed projects littering the region from the NDDC, and so it is a systemic conduit for monumental economic waste and financial corruption. That agency should be scrapped. Now, in its place, I strongly recommend a future education trust fund to be set up and used to directly fund the education from primary school to university level of every Niger Delta child. We can always work out the blueprint for this. Now, when I say education, I also mean entrepreneurship education and vocational educational system. So when those who want to go to university, they go to university, from primary to university. Those who want to do business, you put them into vocational educational systems, they get skills, and then you give them seed capital to start up their businesses. That is what I think we should do for the children, of the Niger Delta. That way, the wealth that Mother Nature put under, their soil will benefit them. All of them will be able to say, I benefited from crude oil resources from our region. So this is a quote by Albert Einstein, I think. It says, our problems cannot be solved at the same level of thinking when we created them. We need radical, bold, and audacious ideas coupled with the will and determination to make tough decisions if we must solve the emergent issues confronting our country. Part of these radical ideas is to do away with recycled persons with tired bodies and exhausted brains in our government institutions. Part of the bane of our society is you have someone who's been governor for 8 years, and then he goes to the Senate. Where he was governor, he didn't do anything. He failed abysmally, and then he's at the Senate, or he becomes a minister. What is the metric that is used to appoint people to man sensitive, government positions? We can't continue in that fashion. This country is blessed with abundant human resources. We have gotten people, that can do this job and build this country, for all of our sakes. We need to stop, recycling tired hands, and expired, brains. Nigeria doesn't lack capable and patriotic individuals with a sense of mission and passion necessary to drive the desperately needed radical positive change of our country. The governance style, methods, and overall strategic objectives by which this country has been administered hitherto is, just saying it as it is, criminal. And that is speaking directly to the various leaders at the 3 tiers of our government architecture. We simply cannot continue on this disastrous path. The time for action is now. And I Permit me to speak to the president and the governors of Nigeria. This country deserves better than what we have done hitherto. To President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, you just returned from a tour of India and now the UAE. I put it to you, this was unnecessary. If I were in your shoes, I would spend the first 2 years of my 4-year term, back in Nigeria, building our economy, producing. Like I said earlier on, if Nigeria earned enough monies, will be respected in the global arena. I listened to your Minister for Finance, Mr. Wale Edu, who reeled out an 8-point agenda for this administration. Permit me to say, with all due respect, you do not need an 8-point agenda. You don't have the luxury of time to deal with an 8-point agenda. I think 3-point agenda would suffice. Eradicate poverty and create jobs. Number 2, crack down on the crude oil sector, stop the criminal banditry and sabotage going on in that sector, and ramp up, our savings in the sovereign wealth fund. And thirdly, ensure there is availability and sufficiency of power, electricity. If you do these 3, your name will go down in the history books as a great leader who turned around the fortunes of this country. And I also say to the governors, sit back in your states and govern for the people. I mean, like you heard in this presentation, there was a time in this country, all Nigeria exported to the world and earned revenues was agriculture. We have the land, we have the people. So get down to work and leave Lagos and leave Abuja and go back to your states. Visit the local governments and use your time to develop this economy. If we build our nation, we would earn the respect of the rest of the world. That is what I think we should spend, 4 years doing. And you don't have, for the new presidents and, the new governors, permit me to remind you also, you do not have 4 years anyway. What you have right now is 3 years and 265 days. All of you just celebrated, for those of you who are doing your first step, you just celebrated the 100 days in office. So you don't have the time because even your 4th year will be spent doing politics. So you barely have 2 years, and 265 days to govern. Use that time wisely. I plead with you for the sake of the unborn generations of Nigerians. Now, that's the end of the program today. I believe in a new Nigeria, and it is possible. This is the end of the program. Join me on my various social media handles. Drop me a comment, follow me, and you can watch this particular video and the other one that are there, drop me a comment. I'd love to hear from you, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.